Hope you're all keeping well. It's been mad rain and weather here, hence why my mad hair is even madder. I hope you're all keeping well. I hope you're all keeping good. I was just looking at that stuff about the BBC and Richard D. Hall, and it's very unfortunate in a lot of ways, in all kinds of ways, and it's a shame that it's come to this. I don't know Richard D. Hall. I don't know anything about the guy other than I've watched his shows over the years and enjoyed them very much. And of course, like everyone else, I wouldn't agree with everything that he covers. But that's just lots of you guys out there wouldn't agree with everything I cover. That's, c'est la vie. But basically, from what I gather, now I'm going to go on by the BBC source. Obviously, he can't say anything right now because it's in sort of the legal world of things, and I'm completely ignorant too. So I'm just saying, I'm just coming across this from my experience of seeing these kind of things happen before. But I have noticed with people who take a thing with false flags, this whole thing that like a major news event, usually involving a mass murder or something, or a terrorist attack, was actually not set up by the intelligence services. Now, false flags do exist, and we've had some very nasty ones exposed by Gladio that were done in Belgium, and they came out in court. And so they do exist, and they've come out in places in court over the years. These false flags, and it's just because some of these events have been exposed as false flags, a general thing appears where people say, well, they're all false flags, and that's simply a dangerous assumption to make. One of the reasons, as a pagan, I'm equally terrified of Islam as I am Christianity, and I know that crusade and jihad are real things. And when I see people saying things like the Bataclan was the Illuminati, trying to blame it on Muslims, no, that was a jihadist attack. And so was all the other stuff, all of it. And, it gets them off the hook. And it's almost like playing into the establishment by getting them off the hook. The way there's currently a trope doing the rounds among Normie land, and it was covered in the English Independent newspaper, that somehow they made up this fake story, this fake news story, that most people now are far more concerned about conspiracy theorists than they are Islamic terrorists. Whoa, that's gaslighting into the. I know a single person on this earth, other than someone who's probably a college professor and is mentally ill, like most college professors, who would think that. The majority of people would be much more worried about a jihadist attack than they ever would be about someone writing a conspiracy theory blog or making a video. But it's all about changing the goalposts and changing the narrative. So anyway, apparently what I gather from this thing on the BBC is that Richard D. Hall approached. He claimed the Manchester 1 arena bombings was a false flag. I don't know about that. I think that was real, and I've got personal insight into that, because the day that happened, I flew back into Dublin. I was actually in England somewhere. I don't remember. It was in Manchester. And Dublin airport was filled with thousands, and I don't mean hundreds, I mean thousands of young English Muslim guys, dark-skinned Muslim guys. They were obviously like of Pakistani or Arabic heritage. And then they all got on the planes at 4 or 5 o'clock to go back to England, to Manchester. They all got on the flights to Manchester. So they were almost given a warning, or had insight, that something was going to go down and get out of town, which just goes to show you the enormity of the Islamic terrorism network in terms of its infiltration in those communities. And it's just a sad fact of life. I mean, it's just like IRA terrorism existed in the past. This exists today, and you have to deal with it. It's real. And so I wouldn't say it was thousands, I'd say a few hundred. I could see them all around the airport. I was there all day. And as soon as the evening flights, the flights to Manchester, sorry, it was the day after, and they were all getting on the flight. So they spent the night in Dublin airport hanging around so they wouldn't be rounded up in police operations. So it was as clear as day to me, and exactly what was going on. And you find that happens with, just like when the mafia are doing something and they all get out of town. Just like when the IRA were doing something in England, they used to all get out of town so they couldn't be rounded up. And it was the same thing, a classic. And that's how I knew how the Manchester Arena was a jihadist attack. And apparently he claims it isn't, and that's it. But he did something. He went up to someone who'd been injured, and it's like the Sandy Hook thing. They're claiming that no one was actually killed. And no, this is where it goes. You see, this is what happens with the false flag possession. It's one thing, here's where I think it all comes from. The unresolved answers to 9/11. I think there's a lot of people out there who never got the answers to 9/11, and by the answers they were convinced that one day that the people behind it were going to be arrested and rounded up. They're going to be arrested and rounded up. And it never happened. So they get they think everything after that point is a false flag. And they'll use anything, and sometimes maybe they are false flags, but they'll usually destroy it by going too far. You see, if you look at the Gladio false flags in Belgium, ordinary Belgian people were murdered in these false flag attacks. So they assumed that, well, no one was murdered by the intelligence services or by a mass murder or whatever. And the thing is that they were murdered, and then they think they're all liars, they're all fakers. And this all comes out of a very weird, bizarre behavior among truthers and conspiracy theorists, that somehow these people didn't die. None of them died. And they usually go to the most bizarre lengths to try and prove that every kind of mass shooting or every attack was a false flag, often to very sadistic and evil levels. I can remember about 8 or 9 years ago, an American TV reporter was shot on live on TV, a young girl, and the guy who shot her dead, she was caught on camera. It was awful. And the guy that shot her dead was a disgruntled TV employee. And all the truthers were posting her murder on Facebook, going, look, what an actress. She should get an Academy. And the young girl was gunned down on camera. It was the same thing with this girl, the girl with the phone. Remember that? This is why I distance myself so much from truthers and these kinds of, these types of conspiracy theorists. They after a while they have a complete lack of humanity, because the false flag possession takes over. And this is why you had a situation where people were walking up to family members who did lose kids in Sandy Hook and said, you're just an actor, your child is still alive. Now, I know there's some dodgy stuff with Sandy Hook, but because something is dodgy doesn't mean no one died. Just because there's dodgy things with 9/11 doesn't mean no one died. And this is where they come up. This is where they're always trying to deny that no one died. And it becomes this kind of weird system of possession. And where they go so deep into this rabbit hole that they can't escape. It's that classic Nietzschean thing, don't stare into hell too long, otherwise hell will stare back at you. Or I think it was Carl Jung said, if you go into the abyss and remain there, you'll become the abyss. Now that's sage counsel. Always remember that. Whenever you're into anything, I mean, even the stuff that's upset me and made me angry, like this lockdown nonsense and all this stuff over the Rona, I still made sure to live my life and not become obsessed with it. I still joke and tell jokes and laugh, because my humor is a big part of the safety valve I use to stop me from getting too deep into the stuff and losing the run of myself, and I find that putting the brakes on is a great way of. I've got a great. I don't know. I've got really. I'm gonna burp. Sorry, it's gonna be disgusting what happens, but the this it becomes a kind of a possession, and this possession is it becomes a kind of a runaway train inside people's consciousness, and they can't put the brakes on. And we see that all the time, like, and then when the resolution doesn't come in, the rationale becomes more and more absurd. You all know that, like 9/11. Okay, my attitude of 9/11 is something dodgy went down. And then someone say to me, well, what's dodgy about it? I said, well, there's a few things. Firstly, how the bin Laden family was spirited out of the United States. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, while there was a complete lockdown on all flights. That was even put out there by Michael Moore in this movie. The 5 dancing Israelis, it still needs to be explained properly. The so-called the story of the passport that was found on the ground, that makes absolutely no sense. Other than that, the official narrative, of course, the buildings coming down is a whole other thing. But in terms of the actual attack, in terms of how it was planned, I still don't understand. And also the biggest one of all with that, the biggest dodgy thing of all of that is it was committed by the Saudis. It was committed by the Saudis with people on those planes who were up there with the Saudi, right up there connected to the Saudi royal family. And yet somehow Iraq got the blame. And that's the biggest one of all with 9/11. But apart from that, I don't know anymore. That's where it ends for me, okay? I don't know anymore. Dodgy things happened. I'm pretty sure there's a lot being hidden. But I'm not an expert on anything else to know anymore. And that's why you get these people that starting to believe that there was no planes involved. No, there was planes involved. I mean, I know some people in the North. I know some of the North saw both of them, and these are friends of mine. And now, whether they were planes or whether they were planes, they still were real objects that flew into the buildings and caused massive explosions. But that was where it ended for me. And I'm far more interested in the psychological, and the sort of consciousness and even the spiritual, psychological, Fortean aspects of that event more than the actual, the grand conspiracy behind it. Because I know that will never be solved. It's like Kennedy will never be solved. It'll never be solved. And so that's why I've never got into these things. They're a can of worms. 2 reasons. One, they distract from the fact that Islamic terrorism is real. And secondly, they are just too complicated and too big, and I don't want to be involved in something that actually is making fun of someone who's been seriously injured or dead. I don't want that on my conscience, and I'll leave it at that. So I walk away from it. I'll just say it's dodgy, and then there's like a kind of a whirlpool of madness kind of comes into these things. Like, do you remember the Las Vegas shooting? And all the truthers were all posting, how did a guy his age get all those guns and weapons up on top of up to his hotel room? An elevator. And no one saw him. He puts it in a suitcase. Coming back and forth. I've done that. Everyone does that in a hotel stay. You'll have cases, you may get extra clothes, you may buy gifts, and you bring up and down the lift. An AR-15 is not the size of a house. It can fit into a golf club bag. And also it was an insight to how the kind of, like, a lot of these truthers have never stayed in hotels. They don't know what it's like to be in a hotel. They're from the bottom of the barrel of society. And the only place they've and even though they said they were monitored all the time, makes me say the only place they've ever stayed overnight are either psychiatric hospitals or prison cells. They don't even know what a hotel is and how a hotel works. And that was just amazing to me. And then you say, how could he have those sniper skills to kill that many people? He sprayed a fucking crowd of thousands of people with a semi-automatic machine gun. It was, there was no need to be to pick a target. Just spray into the fucking where the people were and kill them. That's what happened. Oh, well, you know, but how did he? How did he do what? He was a nut job. He's a nut job who killed a lot of innocent people who were having a nice night out, and created hell on earth. That's all that happened there. It happens. Deal with it. Doesn't mean that he's working for the Illuminati as a lizard or something like that. These things happen. And how could he kill how could so many people be killed from that height? A fucking AR-15 bullet can go through armored plated of a tank. That's how tanks are often taken out in wars with guns. Did you know that? Actual rifle fire takes tanks out. So you'll have no problem shooting down the top of a hotel building down to a group of people and killing them. Those bullets would have embedded themselves deep inside the tarmac. You know, and so this is the whole kind of thing. They see everything, and that mocks the people who died and their families who are grieving. The truther, in many ways, has this psychopathic aspect to his personality, or her personality, where they don't seem to have any compassion for people who died. They're just, you know, crisis actors in every situation. And it's horrible, it's evil. And it was only a matter of time before this false flag possession was going to end with something like this. I mean, that's it. I mean, maybe there's theories out there that I don't know about, but at the end of the day, it's a no-win situation. Other than saying it's dodgy, all right, and that's the end of it. But you can't be walking up to people who've been injured or killed, or family members who've died, or have lost family members, and say, "You're a liar. Your daughter didn't die," or "You're a liar. You weren't really shot, and the guy is now blown up, and the guy has no legs." You know, this kind of thing. That's. I mean, I've gotten more grief over the years from truthers than anyone else. Why? Because I always say, put the brakes on. Put the fucking brakes on. And try to keep your humanity and your compassion intact. And it's as simple as that. But they don't. They go headfirst directly in, both barrels blazing. Excuse the pun. That it's all a false flag, that there's no victims, and the ones who are victims are liars or crisis actors. And that's all there is to it. When in reality, when we know that there's been shootings that have been confirmed as false flags, such as the Gladio ones in Belgium, innocent people have been killed. The same with the one that happened with Propaganda Due in Verona train station in Italy. 80 people died. People die. Yes, they're false flags. But yes, they're phony. Yes, they could be, but the people still die. And these truthers seem to have that. This is the difference in someone who's a truth seeker and a truther. A truth seeker says, "Well, the bomb went off, and I think it was dodgy, and I think there's something to investigate." A truther goes, "The bomb went off, no one was killed, and all the people who they say are dead, and all their family members are crisis actors." And that's the fucking that's when they've gone into hell too deep. So I mean, it looks like. I'm not going to comment on it. I hope it all works out for everybody in the end with the Richard D. Hall thing. And people have been saying that Neil Sanders has stabbed him in the back. I don't think he's done that at all. I just think it's an unfortunate thing, and he's trying to distance himself from that aspect of his work. I'd probably do the same. I don't think he stabbed anyone in the back. I think Neil Sanders has been quite sensible about it. I would be the same way. And you know, there's people that I'm friends with that I'm into some of the stuff they're into, and then there's other stuff I wouldn't go touch it with a 10-foot pole. And the mainstream media loves the concept of guilt by association. And, you know, tread carefully. That's all I would say. Tread carefully, because you can push the envelope so far. But without the resources, both financial and other resources, such as technical and so on, you can't push the envelope out to the point where you'll fall out the end of it. Just be very careful when you do these things. Because I think you know, this is the whole Christian mind virus again, that everything's going to be solved, and Jesus is going to, and also the New Ages with their karma thing as well, that Jesus is going to solve everything, and it's all going to be right one day, and the sinners will be judged. It doesn't happen like that. So take care. I'll make another video in a little while on a different subject. Now watch, all the truthers will be on here now called Shill Sheridan, Shill Sheridan, Shill.